our league we were playing in, I can't communicate with athletes at all during the game.
Yeah.
So like they're on their own. And I stressed as a coach, you need everyone to sit there and try to calm this person down in the moment. It's nice to ride the high, just like any athlete. You catch a big touchdown, take them to the next drive. But esports, it's a little tougher, I would say, because they're a little too excited. And so now you're talking about fine motor skills, and now my heart rate's jumping up, and now, I'm using the mouse and my hand's shaking a little bit more, and I can't steady out, my aim.
Welcome to the Winning Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Mitch Schwartzman. I'm a family man, a coach, a wannabe athlete. After earning 3 master's degrees and countless certifications, I've decided that podcasting is how I'm going to continue my education in all things wellness, longevity, and performance. Join me to learn along.
You tell us a little bit about how you got into gaming. It's video games, so a lot of us got into it, but you could maybe how you bridge that gap into like a different kind of role. The esports thing is really interesting. As someone who played a bunch of video games growing up, I never thought or even knew about it being like a competitive thing outside of the people in the same building as you. And kind of where you've taken it with the scientific twist on things.
Yeah, so I started esports, just like Mitch said. I grew up playing video games. My parents got me a Nintendo 64. I was playing Mario, and it was a lot of fun. It was something to do in your free time. And then that kind of evolved. The next system came out. I got an Xbox. I got a PlayStation. I'm starting to game with my friends. It's a way that we're able to connect. And then I just got really good at a game. So my game was Call of Duty. I would play it every day I got out of school. I would, invite my friends. We'd have tournaments. We'd register for tournaments. And then I realized that, hey, I'm really good at this game. And so then I was able to actually go semi-professional, and I played for an organization who paid me very small amounts of money. I was in middle school. It was probably like $10 for a tournament. But, you're still a paid athlete at that point. So every bit counts. So I really kind of started doing that. I really enjoyed it. Kept it all the way through undergrad. Ended up, getting my degree in exercise science. Got to Lindenwood, got into research. Was doing a study looking at esports performance and supplementation. So looking at a caffeine-like substance and how that affects gameplay performance. That led me into my thesis project, which looked at how exercise influences esports performance. So I was looking at a 60 to 70% heart rate on a cycle ergometer. These guys have worked out for 20 minutes straight. As soon as they got off, popped them on the game and let them play against another person, which was the truly uniqueness of that study is they actually played another human. They weren't playing a computer, so you actually got to, get into the game and have a competitiveness. And then that led me to start esports coaching, where I kind of got more into the health and wellness side of it. I actually had a buddy at Lindenwood who was doing that with the Olympic weightlifting team, and they had their little weightlifting initiative. And I was jealous. I'm like, I want this. I want to be able to, look over this team. And I was in a position, not only as a coach, but as a researcher to step in and, really look at these athletes and be like, hey, I see something's up and you guys, either aren't taking good care of yourselves, you guys don't have good sleep. And so I kind of started doing some health and wellness monitoring for the Lindenwood esports team. Mostly my teams, I tried to branch on to other teams, but that's a little more difficult because of their time constraints.
What can we hear more about that thesis? You're doing the 60 to 70% of your heart rate, 20 minutes, and then you go play. How is that influencing their performance?
Yeah, so luckily for that one, it was pretty easy to do. I recruited 20 individuals, but I didn't screen for necessarily them being athletes because I think that one is a tough thing. So a lot of people look at gamers and they think, they're overweight, they're not active, and I mean some of it's true. But I mean, sometimes you have the outliers where they're actually athletes. So I was lucky enough to have a couple individuals on my team who were athletes, soccer player, tennis player. So I was able to have some people who I knew were already working out. And then kind of through my literature, it showed that there was no differences between people who had already worked out and who haven't worked out from the cognitive benefit that you could get from exercising. So that was the premise, is you get this cognitive gain after exercising. You're getting more blood flowing. That blood's flowing to the brain. You're able to process things a little bit more. So for the game specifically, I chose Rocket League. So I was coaching Rocket League at the time. And for those who don't know, Rocket League is car soccer. So pretty much you're driving a car, you can fly around, do all this stuff. So there's a lot of stressors. There's a lot of working arms to it. So I broke it down and I was looking at, the reaction time, the spatial awareness, is any of this changing as people get exercise? I probably went a little too much and was trying to, knock everything off the board and find the next best thing for all these things instead of just being like, does it help cognition in general? Cognition is, or I guess executive functioning. Executive functioning is, everything. So it's reaction time, spatial awareness, all those types of things fall under that blanket. But for my study specifically, I was able to find that it lowered their perception of their match. So they were actually believing they were performing better. And they were able to save more goals, which is one of the things. So like you played goalie in this game too. So they were able to save more goals throughout the game, but I really didn't see too much about that. Anything else. So I mean, it was a small n size. If I would have had a bigger one, it might have been a little bit easier. But the power of my study was able to suffice with 20 people.
What was that about the perception? It increased their perception. They thought they were doing better than they actually were.
So they thought they were doing better. So I tested pre-match or pre-exercise, post-exercise, post-games. How well do you think you played? How well did your opponent play? Just gauging it. Everyone wants to know how they're doing. And so that was able to see, if you do exercise and you're getting this boost, is this actually making you play better? Or are you perceiving you are? And so funny enough, in the beginning, I'm not gonna lie, I had messed up as a researcher and it ended up getting fixed, but I had an individual who was a lot lower skill level than the guy he was paired up with. You're talking the game, the guy lost like 20-0. Like he was trying real hard to win, but he just couldn't do it because the guy was better. But even though he was losing so bad, every questionnaire he did, he said he thought he was playing better whenever he exercised. So I guess to backstep here, each person would exercise, each person wouldn't exercise. So it was a crossover design. So they got to see, truly, how did I fare here? How did I fare here? But that individual on the day he exercised really thought he was doing better. And he very well could have been. I didn't look at, I didn't watch every video because I recorded everything. But he believed it. His perception was better. And I mean, that was promising because then you get rid of this negative connotation people might have had about exercise. Because, if these individuals already don't want to go work out or, they have these negative perceptions that, exercise is good for me, it doesn't make me feel good. Well, now say the game you're playing and you want to, you're aspiring to be better at it. And now you just exercised and your mind's telling you, oh, I'm doing good. That was a plus. And that was a barrier I was trying to break down with these, participants is, exercise is good for you.
Yeah. So they think they're playing better and they're
doing better in the game.
And they are actually doing, so they're saving more goals. Are they scoring more? Did you have a metric on the offense?
So I split it up into 3 series. So it was 3 games, 3 series. So 9 games total. We did the stats to look at, series 1 versus series 2, series 2 versus 3, 1 versus 3, looking them all together. They were able to have a better goal percentage in the 3rd series. So it was more of a time effect. So, the exercise benefits are setting in later. Because, I mean, I'm sure they were exhausted. I mean, you're talking about people who haven't exercised, just got off the bike going, at a pretty high intensity for, 60 to 70% where they're not used to it. But, they were able at the end there to have better goal percentage.
Okay. Nice. Yeah, I was wondering, I was surprised earlier when you said that they were playing against like a live opponent, kind of thinking like, well, research is more about like consistency, and I was surprised that it wasn't against a computer, for lack
Yeah.
of a better term.
Yes.
But now I see that you're measuring both parties, correct?
Yeah, so I was actually one of the first studies to do it, and the reason why I did it is because I hated the fact that it was a computer. Computers are set at a certain skill level. So if you take a professional athlete, they're going to wipe the floor with a computer because they've done so much in the game, they understand it, so like they're going to outperform it. So the workaround for there was I recruited people within a certain range. For there's like three different game modes. I'm trying not to get too technical in esports since I know a lot of
Sure.
people don't understand it.
Yeah.
But everyone has a rank, so a skill level or a skill threshold they hit. And I only recruited a certain amount because some of them are very hard to find, like the top level people who are professionals are hard to find in that rank, especially around St. Charles, Missouri, where I was doing the research. And then you have people who are the lower ranks who it's not good because they don't know what they're doing, and I could have had awful data. So I kind of took the midpoint where about 70%, 76% of the population falls. And each person that got in, minus the one that we talked about earlier, where I had a mess up, I paired everyone to be within plus or minus one of their ranks. So the ranks are like gold, silver, platinum. If you were a gold level, you can only play gold or platinum. So you had to be within there, and you couldn't play, the top level plat if you were a low level of gold. So I tried to keep some consistency there. So then they were truly, paired together at a ranking that was fair and competitive to them. To again keep the consistency where, as you look at research, everyone is stacked up against, the same thing. There's nothing different about it. There's no, I would say, learning effect, like that kind of stuff. Like it made it consistent for these people to get these same stimuli each time. Like they wouldn't go and they play the same person each time. So I had to plan for the same two people. So if it was me and you, we had to show up on Monday, we had to show up on Friday. I couldn't switch myself to go play, little Jimmy over there. Like I had to play you to keep it consistent. So it was a lot, but I mean, it ended up being a good study because, again, I was the first person to be able to do it, and it worked out, and I got to see some great results with it.
Nice. Yeah. And you mentioned coaching. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Specifically, like if we're treating video game players as esport athletes, how much carryover is there from like a traditional physical sport athlete, and then what are the things that are kind of unique to esports that you're going to be concerned about?
Yeah, so kind of with coaching, like I said earlier, I coached three teams. So I coached Rocket League, the car soccer game. I coached Valorant, which is like a first-person shooter game, and I coached Counter-Strike Global Offensive, which is also a first-person shooter. So I had two different genres of games I was coaching. So one is all based around, sports sim, the car soccer. And then I have the first person shooters that rely more on fine motor skills, more of a, I don't want to say more of a strategic thinking, but more of a strategic thinking because you're playing on, a team with four other people. So to take from traditional sports, I think there's correlations. I mean, I treat them as athletes. My esports athletes are athletes. They're athletes in a different perspective. Our physical athletes or traditional athletes, or as I like to call them because of esports, they're more physically oriented. They're getting the bruises, they're going out there, they're exerting their body a lot more physically than these esports athletes are. But and then I guess mentally they're also straining because there's a lot of thinking in sports. The quarterback has to think of all the routes, and the receiver has to remember to run the right route and catch the ball. And, hey, I have a defender here, so I got to jolt left. There's a lot of mental processes in all the sports. Esports is not physical. So these athletes have honed themselves to be mentally capable to have strain. So again, not to go crazy in the esports, but there's games where you buy items in the game, and these items can help you counter other people in the game. So you're playing a character, and they may be good at healing. You can buy an item in the game that stops the healing, but you have to know that, this person, like this character is what you're doing. So it's a mental game for these athletes. And it's constantly changing. Not every game's the same. So, you look at a game like Valorant, you're planning what they call the spike on a site. You got to guard the site for, 30 seconds after you did it. And this enemy team is trying to defuse this. And your goal is to stop them. Well, now there's 17 different angles this person can come from, and you have to know based on, what you've seen in game, what the sound you're hearing in the game. There's a lot of strain for these athletes trying to figure out where everything's happening. And so the approach you could take, I think, is, to treat them like athletes because they don't want to be not considered that. They want their sport to be known. And it's just you take the mental aspect. So you get mental performance coaches in traditional sports. If your athlete's feeling down and they're not feeling well, like they just had a bad game, they need the mental performance coach to come pick them up. Same thing in esports. Like their sport, they're going to get down. They're going to be having games where they're not playing well. And then, they flow into the next round and they don't know what to do because there's nothing there. So I think there's a lot of, things that we can take to help those athletes and to understand them and to help them in their performance aspects. So I hope I answered that correctly. Or I hope I answered that and gave you all the things you're looking for.
Yeah, sort of staying near that topic or area, I guess. I've seen multiple times they'll talk about like during chess tournaments, the spike in caloric output is that some chess athletes will burn 5,000-6,000 calories a day sitting down, whereas normally they're probably going to burn more like 2,000, give or take a couple hundred. So they're doubling maybe 250% of their normal output. You guys seen any numbers like that? Or like when you feel that effect of like being mentally drained, how do you recover?
Yeah, so I haven't seen it personally. I didn't get to be able to look at that kind of stuff with my teams. I was mostly tracking, and this could go, I'm sure this would be a question later too, but I'll hit it now. There was a bunch of, performance indicators I look at with athletes and a lot of things that I cared to see. And it's a lot of it, I wanted to look at heart rate. I think that's a big thing same thing with traditional sports is you want to see, what level what these athletes are working at and, how much strain they have. And so I tossed a heart rate monitor on one of my players just for the fun of it. They played it's probably about an hour and a half game. So, they're sitting down doing their thing and I tracked heart rate, looked a little bit of heart rate variability, but I wasn't too knowledgeable about it at the time. And the software we were using, me and one of the professors I was working with really didn't dive into it too much because we didn't trust the numbers. But they're in a round of this game and it's a 1v5. So they're trying to beat 5 other people and they're the only one alive on the map on their team. And you could see the heart rate spike, they're sitting at like 70 and now they're at like 150 because they're panicking. And it's, then the guy ends up winning the round for my team, beats all 5 people, the heart rate's still spiked, and then he's still sitting there spiked. And so it's, as a coach in that and as a researcher, I guess more as a coach, it's tough because in our league we were playing in, I can't communicate with athletes at all during the game.
Yeah.
So like they're on their own. And I stressed as a coach, you need everyone to sit there and try to calm this person down in the moment. It's nice to ride the high, just like any athlete, you catch a big touchdown, take them to the next drive. But esports, it's a little tougher, I would say, because they're a little too excited. And so now you're talking about fine motor skills, and now my heart rate's jumping up, and now, I'm using the mouse and my hand's shaking a little bit more, and I can't steady out, my aim. So I relied on a lot of my students and players to, be able to, talk it through. Like I almost tried to make them like mini performance coaches, of like, here's, remember these tactics of like, in through the nose, out through the mouth. And, having positive mental attitudes, and after your teammate does something good, like say, good job, man, like really like let them know so that high goes down. It's and there's times where you're like, yes, I want him to keep it. So like in a fast-paced game where, there is no break. So in the first-person shooter games, there's breaks in between rounds. So you have like you win the round, you have 20 seconds before the next one starts. So you kind of regain composure. But a game like Rocket League it's a constant go mode. It's 5 minutes of constant action. Um, Almost like real soccer. There's really no stoppage time. You're going for almost, 45 full minutes, minus the person falling down, getting hurt, but like you're constantly going. Same thing in Rocket League. You have 5 minutes of, I am zoned in and I have to know what I'm doing. And I think that makes it a little bit easier for those athletes, to keep the high. But in a game that's a little more, you know, I don't want to say slow pace, but like a slower pace, I think is important to kind of monitor heart rates like that. So, if I'm a coach, I can call a timeout in the game. I don't get a lot. I don't get like 3 timeouts or 6 timeouts. I get, one tactical timeout where, if I notice that it's starting to affect someone, I call it and I say, hey, let's take this minute and a half to do some deep breathing exercises and, calm down and get everything underneath our feet and just kind of understand, like, just breathe. It's just like any other sport. You're getting jittery. You need to focus on. So
Yeah. A few things to kind of kick back from that. I did another podcast with a Dr. Tara Vossenkemper, and she is a couples counselor. She's, well, amongst other things, she kind of specializes in that. And she sometimes during therapy throws heart rate monitors on her clients. And when the heart rate gets too high, she's like, we have to take a time out because you are stressed and you're not going to listen. This is not going to be productive, like counseling time. So like, go take a breather, walk around. When your heart rate comes back down, we'll come in and we'll do this work, which, it's cognitive and emotional work.
yeah,
they're sitting on a sofa probably. So it's kind of funny the way you talk about that just made me think of that. And the way you talk about turning your athletes into fellow coaches.
Mm-hmm.
That was one of the biggest kind of pillars of like West Side Barbell powerlifting club. Is that this guy Louis Simmons? He used to be the head guy over there before he passed, and he would just tell everybody's watching everybody all the time. Instead of one pair of eyes, you've got 17 pairs of eyes on you, or whatever. So to empower your athletes to coach, I try to steal that from him, and I when I bring it up and when I instill that, a lot of times it pays off. Sometimes it bites you in the butt, but a lot of times it does pay off. When you talk about your athletes' heart rates being such a, maybe like is it fair to say it's a correlation of their performance? Like the higher their heart rate, the poorer their performance is going to be?
Like I said, I feel like it's very situational because, like I said, like in Rocket League, it's such a fast-paced game that like you kind of want people to, keep the adrenaline going. If they're doing good, you want to keep it. But those like slower paced games where like there is a bunch of downtime. So like in those games when your character, dies, you're sitting there until the round is over, and then you have an extra 20 seconds to wait, and then now you're back in the action.
Yeah.
So those are a little tougher because, again, like I said, like I think you want people to come down a little bit and kind of refocus because, once your mind gets moving a million miles a minute, like you can't stop it. And it's just those games are so tough, I feel, to, justify sometimes the high heart rates. And, I think people lose focus because of it. Because, now you're thinking about so many things. You're thinking about my hands moving here, my chest is pounding because I'm nervous of what's going on in the game. And I think sometimes there's more mental lapses whenever you're in this excited state. So
yeah. And then you were mentioning some KPIs. Do you have more to share on that as far as the KPIs that you were kind of like tracking or focused on?
yeah. So specifically with my teams, like I said, I was kind of in like the health and wellness interest with my teams. And so I took my performance and nutrition research mind and brought it to my esports teams. So I was looking at things like, physical health. So, nutrition, how much are we getting? Are we eating like slobs? Are we eating healthy? How much are you exercising? So I would send out a survey for those at like the beginning of the year, or the beginning of the semester. And I would say, fill out this. I use the Dietary Health Questionnaire 3, GHQ 3. It allows you to do a whole month recall. So over the past month, how much have I ate, serving sizes, you get an output of, your calories, all your macros, all your micros. And then you also get a healthy eating index. So I was interested in that, how good are my athletes eating? They're all on campus, how good is campus providing them food? So I mean, that was a side thing of, is campus doing a good job? A lot of my athletes were down low on this. We have Chick-fil-A on campus. Let's go get some Chick-fil-A. I don't like veggies. I'm not going to eat them. I'm not getting enough fruit. And so I use that to kind of leverage and have discussions with teams. So I worked with all the teams. I worked with coaches, and I would do these surveys, free of charge, and say, hey, let me talk to your team. You have 6 players who have a healthy eating index score, between 0 and 100. They're sitting in the 40s. Just let me give them a talk about how to properly eat, what food groups you need to be hitting, how you can do this, because I know it's tough being a student on campus. There's not a lot of options. And I feel like, before I left Lindenwood, they were doing better. They had just hired a new company to come in and do the food. And they had a lot better options. I'm not going to say it was tasty, and I think that's tough, but that was one of my big things. I was looking at the cognitive performances with my teams. So lucky enough, we were able to get a Dynavision board early on in the year when I started coaching. So I was looking at just broad reaction times, the test A, having them stare at the screen, see the numbers, call out the numbers, and only hit green lights while red lights were also popping up. I looked at the test B, so how quick can you hit these red lights? And I looked at that more from a standpoint of this is a game of fine motor skills. And so you got this big board on the wall, and you have to use all your peripheral vision to see. And so that helps them when they're in game and there's a small object on the screen, they're able to notice it if it's at the bottom left of their screen or the bottom right of their screen. That was a correlation I was trying to find is, does this help improve those types of things? And then I was working on a smaller one of the Dynavision. So instead of using all 5 rings, I tried to condense it down. So it's about the size of a computer monitor. You have a 32-inch monitor. Let's simulate, these fine motor skills of, you're not necessarily using a mouse and, you're not waving it like all around like this. You're just using your hand to move. I tried to simulate that for them so they can kind of try to get an applicable skill per se for reaction time. And then some mental well-being. So I looked at kind of some stressors, some burnout. So I think burnout's really big with our athletes. So, their enjoyment with the game. And then sleep quality. I was really big on sleep quality with my athletes, tracking. I used the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Questionnaire. So, how much sleep have you gotten the past month when when you're going to sleep? And I tried to get that out to my athletes on a monthly basis because I didn't want to overwhelm them with, academics, practices, and then also throwing survey on survey at them. I tried to not impede as much. But, I have an obligation as a researcher, but I also have an obligation as a coach, and I didn't want to overstep my bounds in the program. So I tried to keep it as minimal as possible, but give good data back to other coaches who don't come from, our backgrounds and don't understand this types of things. I try to give back to them as much as I could.
So you're doing a whole bunch of basic, just like wellness, right? So
yes.
And I don't have a perfect explanation for it, but a lot of times I'll draw like a little pyramid and I'll say your wellness is your base of your performance, and then your performance is at the top. Like it's great that like back in the 90s, Jordan had a flu game and He performed well when his tummy was hurting or whatever. But I'm like, you don't have to do that. You could like sleep well and take care of yourself and just feel better. And the better your wellness is, the better your chance for performance is. So, in that mindset, I know one of the things that has been like, relevant for the last several years, especially for me, is the more I sit, basically the worse I feel. Um, how many hours a day are these as like a typical esports athlete performing or practicing or whatever? Because like if I'm a basketball player or a football player, I'm gonna put in like 1 to 3 hours a day, and then I'll be doing other things. I'm away from that sport. I'm away from that repetitive activity. Occasionally they're doing 2-a-days or watching extra game film or whatever. But with an esports athlete, they could play for 24 hours a day if they wanted to.
Yeah.
So what do you think? What do you think is the average? And then can we talk a little bit about like all that sedentary activity or inactivity?
Yeah, so I'm gonna pull something up real quick so I can refer to this. So I did a study with my teams, looking at the pretty much everything I've talked about. I did a little micro study with 15 of my players, looking at all this wellness tracking. I presented it at Central States ACSM. I was looking at gaps in, I'm gonna pull it over to my side screen here, looking at gaps in body composition, nutrition, sleep, and gameplay. Because I was curious, I'm a coach, but I don't see every team. I don't know how much every team is practicing. I clocked out of 15 individuals, they had 44 plus minus 22 hours a week playing games, sitting at a computer.
Yeah. Okay.
And and that's just college. So then on the flip side, I networked with some coaches in professional, and they were talking about how, they're getting paid to do this, no different than an NFL player. I'm sure they're putting, numerous hours in on this. But these athletes would like go to a practice and like have a scrimmage, and their scrimmage took 16 hours because they didn't want to stop playing. One day took 16 hours to keep playing because they just loved it so much. So you're talking 16 hours of constantly sitting in a chair, being inactive just because, and I get it, you enjoy it, but you're not taking great care of yourself. And it's a full-time job, but I just saw it with my team when I was at Lindenwood. Is 44 hours a week. You're sitting in a chair doing nothing. So it's a full-time job for college where you have studies, you have, everything else you have to do, and they're still finding time to put in 44 hours a week sitting in a chair. So I was like, I wasn't baffled because I know the population. I come from both sides. I know traditional sports, I know esports now, but it's hard to believe that like they're willing to sacrifice health to do that. I think there needs to be, a happy medium of this, like the game's not going anywhere, and there's other ways to be good at the game, and I think part of the reason you invited me is to talk about it. There's exercise components to make athletes better. As I looked at my thesis, like exercising for 20 minutes increases your perception. And I think there's not enough out there. I don't think there's enough people talking about, the research that I've done. Obviously, it was a small abstract I presented at a conference, but there's not a lot of stuff. And honestly, I think the athletes are intimidated. I think traditional sports looks at it like, whenever at Lindenwood, Dr. Sutherland would throw on, heart rate monitors for the teams. They just know that's a part of it.
Yeah.
It's been embedded in their mind that, we're gonna get these metrics, we're gonna go lift weights, and this directly correlates to what I'm doing. But you look at a gamer who might not be a traditional athlete and hasn't been exposed to these types of things, and they get scared because it's new. And I have plenty of athletes who just didn't understand it. Why do I need to work out? Why do I need to drink water? I had an athlete who I had to literally say, tell me, like, write down over this week what you're drinking, how much you're drinking. All the guy drank was green tea, like the not the good green tea, like the bottled, like Lipton or like whatever it is, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like the Gold Peak tea is what he's drinking every single day. Not an ounce of water. And he's like, but there's water in there. You look at the ingredients, I'm getting water. And I'm like, but you're also getting 60 grams of sugar on top of that, and that's not good for you. And so I literally, I went out of my way as a coach to look after this guy, and I got him, here's the water bottle. You should be at this point by 6 p.m. tonight. And this man had the audacity to message me after practice one day and said, I'm not feeling great after doing this for like a week. He goes, and I was reading online, that, he was getting headaches and he was kind of talking about it. He said, I read online that I'm getting too much water and my cells are bursting. And I'm like, it's not how it works. Like, yeah, yes, it's how it works theoretically, and it could happen if you're consuming too much, but you're pacing yourself with this water jug, and you're not just like it's not chug the water all in one go. It's pace it throughout the day and get through this much. But he had the audacity to tell me his cells are bursting, and that's why he's not feeling good.
Hey, hey.
And I was like, it's withdrawal. You're so used to 60 grams of sugar, 7 times a day that you're going through this withdrawal. But as soon as you get over that hump, you're gonna feel so much better. And I pray that this man stayed consistent with it after I left coaching there. But I was doing it, and I think he finally understood, that he needed to do it, and he set goals for himself. I made all my players set, not only goals for the season for their performance, but also personal goals, what they wanted to do, and I tried to hold them to it as best as I could. And I'm pretty sure he stayed consistent with it the whole time I was coaching, and I weeded them off of these unhealthy habits.
Yeah.
But I just think they don't understand. They don't come from this background. They don't have the people around them. Luckily I was in the right place, right time, where I was able to take over a team and take everything I learned from, my master's and, becoming a professional and just talking with people and apply it to these teams and, see, small gains and small performance stuff. So, yeah, it was a wild time, and it was fun because I enjoyed it, and it made me happy to be able to give back to that and educate people who don't necessarily understand these types of things.
There's no end to how surprising people can treat their bodies, like
Yes.
or they can convince themselves like five green it's green tea, it's called green tea and the green tea is healthy, and then you say like I'm allowed to have 5 of them and 300 grams of sugar a day or whatever it is, and who knows how many milligrams of caffeine, and it's funny the tolerance and the not ignorance but like not the how naive they are is that they truly believe, and they don't know. That's why we get to have jobs and we get to step in and help out. As a gamer athlete, young Connor raking in $10 a weekend playing and all this other stuff. What do you think would be some things if you had a sports scientist or a performance coach with you? What do you look back and kind of laugh at yourself or kind of wish you would have done differently?
Yeah, I mean, after, being in the research side and being in the coaching side, I think it's advanced a lot. I think that's the great thing. From where I started, so where it is now, I think they're way better. But I think I would have loved to have, if I was playing and at a higher level, and there was the ability to have people around for little middle school Connor, having a coach there who understood that, because like we were player coaches. We did it all. We didn't hire someone to come coach our team. Like we just took our team, and I was an in-game leader and I was a coach. I did it all, and understanding that it constantly playing the game doesn't make you better. I don't want to say you cap yourself, but there's other things that go into it. So it's training the reaction time. So going into I would say cognitive testing that, does this, or memory testing to, really hone in on skills that your game is translated down into. So, if I had a Dynavision board, I would have been on a Dynavision board every day. I loved it. It helps with the reaction time. It helps with my peripheral vision, like not having to just turn my head everywhere looking at things. I can, focus right in the center of my screen, where I need to be looking, and the peripherals are just there. I see someone pop up on the map because I'm not just turning my head. The Dynavision board taught me that. Dr. Sunderland taught me that. Like, don't whip your head around, use the peripherals. Nutrition. I didn't know anything about nutrition growing up. And I think now there's teams in the professional realm that have professional chefs that come in and cook for the teams. There's, um, there's physical therapists who come in and evaluate teams. There's overuse injuries. I'm sure I battled through many. I played on controllers, so I'm using my thumbs every day to do this. I probably had thumb strains every 2 weeks, and I just didn't know. I was just playing through it because I was like, oh, well, that's odd. I must have been, writing my essay with my pencil too hard and gripped my thing wrong, and I just never put two and two together.
Yeah,
And
always blame it on
yeah,
schoolwork.
yeah, it can't be something I enjoy. And so I think it's a lot of the understanding who's involved at this point, who you can go to. So like as I mentioned, like the mental performance coaches, because back then I could play every day and like I wouldn't get tired of it. This is my decompression time. But now I think it's a lot of it's not healthy to sit down this long, and you're gonna get tired of playing. You can't find so much enjoyment out of something every day. You're gonna wake up one day and be like, I don't want to do this. And you feel like it's a job. And I think it's, having people around, like whether it's a mental performance coach, whether it's, someone that can take you away for a second, get out of your, I don't want to say fantasy world, but like, get out of your fantasy world for a second and really just take a step back and see that there's more to it than just the game. There's more processes, there's more task at hand that can help you improve at these types of things. And I wish I would have known that growing up, because I just got bored. That's why I didn't pursue it after that. I pursued coaching, and I was just tired of playing. It was mentally straining to be on a game every day, not knowing what to do other than just play the game.
Yeah.
I had no structured programming. Well, Connor just wanted to play. He was having fun with his friends. And it's just, I think that just having types of people like that to break it down to these simpler steps makes it a lot easier.
I wonder, well, I know I sort of intuitively knew that like long bouts of sitting would kind of just not feel good on my body. Like when me and my wife first started dating, or at some point in our beginning time, she said something to me. She's like, because I would talk about how sitting down, like I wouldn't feel good after sitting down. She's like, you can work out like twice a day and like no problem, but like sitting down bothers you. I'm like, oh yeah, like if I like absentmindedly watch like 2 movies, I mean, like this is like pre-children. But if I was to like watch 2 movies or maybe like do a binge or something on like a Netflix or what have you, my body just would not feel good with like a whole bunch of couch time. And like that's not even like an option anymore. But to sit down, maybe like to just do my work, to just sit in a chair and like crouch forward and have like poor posture, things like that, that does mess me up more than like a lot of like physical training that's like there's high exertion that a lot of people would be like, oh, he's going to be sore, he's not going to feel good after that. But it's not for me. It's the sitting. And Dr. Kelly Starrett, he's a physical therapist. He does a book called Desk Bound. And that book is just like it articulates a bunch of stuff that I was like pretty sure about already. It's like I don't feel good when I'm sitting, and so obviously I'm biased because it talks about things that I was believing already. But he talks about like what happens with your synaptic activity, what's going to happen with your heart health, what happens with your orthopedic health. Um, and they have all kinds of good solutions to like how to sit less when you're standing, how you're going to stand. So I wonder, does anybody ever practice or play on like a walking treadmill or anything?
So unfortunately, we weren't equipped with that at Lindenwood. But me personally, I do. So I have a standing desk. I have a treadmill. So like I game sometimes with it whenever I know I need to do it. But I love that you bring it up because I have so much like thoughts about this. So I mean, there's research out there. So Dr. Seth Ginney out of Slippery Rock, he did a study where they just broke up gameplay with a 6 minute walk. And they found positive results with it. I think he was looking at performance, and there was a positive performance. And so just telling them to get up for 6 minutes and go outside, does that work? And speaking of physical therapist, I was going to work with Dr. Matthew Hugh, who works for a company called 1HP. So it's called One Health Point. It's a physical therapy company based for esports athletes. And I mean, he did ergonomics, he did, these wrist assessments, and he did it all. And he endorses a chair, and says, this is how you should be sitting in your chair. These are, the angles you should be sitting at, the angle you have your arm, how far you should sit from your screen. So I mean, there's a lot to go into it, but it's hard to get that through with athletes to do those types of things. So there's a guy who is a professional athlete who sits with the computer monitor like right here. Like he is up close and personal with it. And he is a top level athlete doing this for however many tournaments he's playing. And he's good, which is the crazy part. But
Oh
I
my
mean, just like you
gosh.
said, like the posturing, now you're talking about eye strain, but I mean, it's crazy. Or like, there's people who like my chair leans like 180 degrees back. Obviously, I don't play like that, but I
Yeah.
have the ability to do it. So I mean, I think it's for these people to look at quality chairs. Okay, I think that's huge. So like me, I just bought my chair. This is a branded gaming chair. I'm not going to give it a free promotion for them, but it's a branded chair that is made for gaming.
Yeah.
But they also call it office ergonomic chair. It was a pretty penny, but it's a great chair. The reason I bought it was because I've had chairs that are, you know, very cushiony. I don't like cushiony chairs because that urges me to sit down more. I
Yeah.
sink in, I feel it. This one's more firm, which I like because I don't feel like it wears out as much. And so I'm gonna, have a nice longevity for this chair. But it encourages me to stand up because now my butt hurts. I'm tired of sitting here. I need to get up. I'll raise my desk up. I'll do, my normal office work. I'll do my gaming for a little bit doing it. And I think it's by educating people of that. So, they not only see those kind of things, but they understand, like get up, it helps, with your performance. 6 minute walk, who would have guessed? Like it's again, I think it goes back to education and having people understand, like, it isn't good to sit like this. But if you're gonna do it, go about it the proper ways. Look up the article that says, you should be sitting, I'm gonna throw out a number, 12 inches away from your thing, sit a foot away from your monitor, maybe whatever it needs to be. Sit with your chair where you're sitting at a 90-degree angle. Don't sit at like a deficit to, there's tons of stuff that, people should be looking at, but they just don't want to.
Yeah.
And there's not people talking about it like this. I think that's the important thing is, this brings light to it. Maybe there's a gamer who's going to come across this and be like, oh, well, now I'm going to go look into it.
I don't know. I don't know that anything good will come of all the cell phones and the screens that are in front of our faces already, just in like being a civilian.
Mm-hmm.
But those gamers, they've got cell phones in their pockets too. So like to imagine that they might be doing, they might have screen like 18 hours of screen time a day. And like, what's that going to do to your vision and to your eyes and to
Oh,
So
and you're talking about like late night gaming sessions. Personally, I'd play at like 3 in the morning. I'm
yeah,
pulling an all-nighter. I'm still going. I'm in my dark room staring at, my TV, or I'm staring at my computer. Now I've become a lot more conscious of, natural light. So luckily, the room I'm in now, we have a window that we open up and we let the natural light come in. And so it kind of alleviates me staring at a screen. I have my blue light blocking glasses that, I became a real fan of after, coming from, both sides. I'm staring at a computer every day at work. And then I also come home and I'm clocking 40 hours a week gaming. It's a lot of eye strain, and, I take proper care, and, I'm setting it far away from my screen as I can. And I think those things are nice, but yeah, there's a lot of strain that goes into this. And I think it's tough to get across from people because, like the guy said that sits that close to his screen, he's a top level athlete. How are you going to tell him to stop? And how in his mind can you tell him that, he can get the same performance sitting, 12 inches from his monitor instead of 2 inches?
oh,
That stuff's hard to get through to those people. And God bless his soul, but at some point it's you have to sprinkle it in with people, and give them hints and kind of lead them in the right direction, because you don't want to dramatically change their habits, because obviously they're at this level because they, they're good, and they have these habits they've built in, and now you take it away and now they're bad, or they're having deficits in performance. And so um way off topic, but just kind of talking about it now, it's like, just like, as a coach, and as a bystander, talking about it, and like I said, like sprinkling in and being like, hey, like, how about today we shift, instead of 2 inches, we shift 3 inches back from our monitor, and you gradually get to it, so you're not having these, like I said, like deficits in performance, and they can naturally weed away the bad habits. Um but yeah.
semi relevant. I don't know if you've ever heard this. I've heard it several times from some pretty respectable parties. Um, the For children who are growing, um, nervous system as well as just bodies, but I understand children who have night lights are have a higher incidence of poor vision.
Hmm.
And so your eyes need rest. Something in that chain, the eyeball, the nerves, whatever, something in there needs rest and some downtime. And to think that you can just skip over all that recovery time and to use them, yeah, I don't know any statistics with it, but I have a hard time believing that that's going to work out.
Yeah, so like when I was coaching, I would walk in and see athletes like in our esports arena, just all the lights turned off, staring at their screen playing the game. And I'd walk in, I'd flip them on, and they'd screech like
Yeah.
vampires. And it's just like, guys, you have to, like, it's not good. And so, obviously, I read the research and I know, and I'm preaching it to these guys, but it was a constant reoccurrence of like, well, I can focus better. There's not all this stuff in my peripherals. I'm literally, all I can see is this one illuminated thing in the room. And it's a never-ending battle. And I think that's be said for, every sport. Just this one in particular has a lot more issues because there isn't a lot of support. I think we're slowly getting there, and there's slowly more professionals coming around who, are catching, with that this is an emerging sport. And we do get to have these conversations.
Going back to maybe that, okay, that group that goes in to have a practice and they say we're going to have a 2 hour practice and they play for 16 hours, or it was going to be a 6 hour practice. I don't know, but it wasn't scheduled to be a 16-hour practice. Is that, at what point is it go from hobby to basically like hobby or profession to addiction? Like at what point? And do you believe that people are addicted to this?
Yeah, so I take a more holistic approach, or more personal, because I could sit down and do it if I'm enjoying it. I think that's part of it. I don't think that necessarily means I'm addicted per se. I think that addiction starts coming when it's interfering, just like any addict, or I'm gonna say any addiction, that's bad. But anything that's going to take a negative impact on things outside of your life. So if your social relationships are falling, or your grades are falling, or your effort at work is falling, I think that's when the talk of addiction comes for video game addiction. I don't think the sitting there for 16 hours, is necessarily addiction because, if you're getting paid to do it, that's your job, but I think it's going about it the right way. Maybe, hey, like if you guys want to play for this 16 hours, how about we break it up for 8 and 8 and we take like a 4 hour recess and we come back to it, like I think that's the thing. But from, Matthew Potoff, who was the GM at the time, who was telling me about this, it's like they couldn't, you know, they couldn't bring in the players to understand, like, like take a break, you're doing too much. But I don't think that necessarily falls as addiction, if you get what I'm saying. Like it's not negatively interfering with, their habits. And if it happens once in a blue moon, I think that's fine. But if you're talking you're practicing 5 days a week, 2 days off, and out of those 5 days, you just had 16 hours, and that's a constant habit. Like, yes, then you're looking at addiction because now you're neglecting your personal hygiene. And I think once it starts affecting those, you can start looking at the addiction talk.
Yeah, I didn't really consider like video games. I didn't know you could even call it an addiction. Until I went and worked with the Arizona Rattlers, and there's an athlete on the team by the name of Quinn Pitcock, who was, I forget if he played at like Miami or Ohio, but he played high-level D1 football, and he got drafted and was playing in the NFL for the Indianapolis Colts. And it was reported that he was video game addicted, and to be away from whatever game he was into, he was having like withdrawal symptoms, and he would feel better when he would get back to his games and things like that. So he was an amazing athlete and like a big dangerous man, like really fantastic at football. But the story went is that the video games distracted him too much, and he could not balance whatever game was in vogue, probably around like 2012 or so, and then his football career. But that was like the first time I had ever heard of it. I didn't know if it had caught on or if it was like something that people were like having issues with, or
yeah, I mean, it's no different than Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray had the same issue. I mean, he was addicted to Call of Duty. It came out that the Arizona Cardinals put in the clause in his contract that like he can't play Call of Duty while in season because it was affecting his performance. Like,
I had not heard that. Okay.
Yeah, that was a big thing. And I think it's, then it's just time management for him. Like you should know, like you're a professional athlete, you have this much time dedicated to practice, this much time for film. And, like I said, like I look at it as like a leisure thing. Like I get off of work and it's like a decompression thing. But I don't think it's addiction because I can go, however many days without doing it. But part of mine of why, I maybe clock 40 hours a week still is, it's I have friends who also play games, and it's my way to connect with my friends still because we all live certain distances away. But I do it the healthy way. I could step away. I can go outside for a walk. I can eat good. And obviously you would think those athletes would. You'd think Kyler Murray understands that, but obviously he didn't, and he got in trouble for it. So,
and then what's kind of cool now on the other side of that coin is I'm told, I've watched a little bit of like footage online, is that Jaden Daniels is the NFL quarterback. I believe he's with the Commanders.
Yep.
And he is a virtual reality believer user, and he's running plays and practices and simulating games with a headset on. And he's claiming it's a big part of his success. So it's funny how there's a saying, somebody has said it well, there's a very thin line from when a weapon becomes a tool or a tool becomes a weapon. Is that this video game stuff for probably way more people, it's probably been a weapon that's hindered them. But now you also have people who are using it as tools for advantages. So kind of funny how that goes.
Yeah, before I left Lindenwood, we had a master's student working with virtual reality for his master's thesis, looking at a game called Win Reality. So Win Reality is a baseball. I don't know too much about it other than, when I got in, kind of messed around with it, but it is a baseball training tool where you could take your VR controller, so there's a little hand thing. You could get a bat attachment to put it on your baseball bat, and you could go in and do batting practice and, go against, Aroldis Chapman and take 100-mile-per-hour pitches. Obviously, it's not the same as going out there and feeling the ball hit the bat. There's a lot of differences between that, and there's going to be some athletes who are haters of that, but he was looking to see if that would help with performance, if it would help with batting average, slugging percentage. He's just finishing up data collection now for that, and he'll do his defense, I think, in May. So I'd be very interested to see that because, I mean, just like that, if he's a firm believer it works, then it works. And so to have this to where, now you're taking away physical strain on these athletes. Maybe you just had a hard day and maybe batting practice is a little too much and you could just pop in the VR and get the same sort of simulated motions and, you can see pitches because I think he could do like a pitch recognition in Win Reality too. So you would just have the athlete stand in, the batter's box in the game, and the ball comes and then it disappears, 20 feet before it hits the box. And you have to guess, where in the zone is it going to hit. And so, now you're training this, perception of, can I guess where the pitch is going to go? Do I know that this is a fastball coming in, the, inside of the box? It was very interesting about how it could be utilized. And I wish I would have got to see more on it before I left.
That's pretty, that's extremely interesting. I don't know if I believe it's the book, The Sports Gene by David Epstein. And he talks about the time of high-speed baseball pitches and the distance from mound to plate and how there's not enough time for high-speed pitches for like our conscious brain to do thinking and to process. And so what you actually want to do, your best chance of being a good batter is to have like incredible eyes so that you can see really clearly and to have seen thousands and thousands of pitches. And you've seen so many pitches that your subconscious brain does most of the work when you're up at the plate. And so, gosh, that if it worked, that could be amazing because it's actually just about seeing those pitches and feeding your like subconscious brain. But that's scary to think that the virtual reality might be good enough to do that.
Yeah, I know a lot of schools endorse it, and I know some professional teams endorse it too. So I think the Cardinals use it. I think Duke, UNC, I can't remember who all is listed on their website, but there's some teams that are adopting it. And I know it's there's I think whenever he was doing his data collection, there's a lot of people who are skeptical because he had a half bat, so it's not a full bat, and you can adjust the weight in it. But you're not getting the same, you're so used to holding, your wooden bat and just that feeling isn't the same. And so I think there's a lot of skeptics of, is it really helping me? Because I feel awkward, because and that goes on the batting side. I think the pitching side, like you said, it's incredible. You can literally sit in a box, not have to do anything and just guess what pitch it is. And now you're just getting the repetitions and you're understanding, this is what it looks like. If I had a 100-mile-per-hour fastball coming, I'm not going to know. I'm not trained to do it, but to sit there and, like you said, get the repetition. And it's effortless. You don't have to go have your pitcher waste his arm doing it for you at practice. You can sit in there and save your resources and hopefully it does the same thing.
Yeah, that could be a whole new world with this stuff, but very interesting. Let's say someone's There's a future coach out there in high school right now listening. What's your advice to someone to put themselves in a place to help out esport athletes from a care side? You're a coach, you're a caregiver of some sort. What would you advise? What do they need?
Ambition. Um, and just an attitude to, again, I think as I mentioned earlier, just the attitude to shift your habits. Because everyone's coming from different angles and different backgrounds and being open to change, just like anyone. I think that's important because you're not going to go anywhere being the same type of person you were 10 minutes ago. Constantly having a changed mindset, I think is important for athletes and getting yourself out there and stepping outside of your comfort zone and understanding that, it's not all in the game. There's
I think EA Sports would disagree.
EA Sports. It's in the game.
I think they would too. But yeah, it's a lot of giving into the system, I think, and getting out of the system of gaming, or getting out of the game, and just kind of building better habits and better understanding of, it's multi-layered, just like any sport, and you got to understand, kind of what you said, like the pyramid's wellness, and you got to evaluate your pyramid and understand that, gaming is at the very top, and that can wait until you can build these other pillars up for yourself.
Um, any other risks or benefits of gaming that we have not discussed?
I touched a little bit on it, but I think the repetitiveness, like the repetitive strain injuries, are pretty big for these athletes. And it depends on the game. Like I said earlier, like me, whenever I played on console and I was playing with just a controller, I got thumb strains. You're moving your thumbs in the same sort of way every time. And then same thing with playing like keyboard and mouse. My hand stays anchored down, so I'm getting wrist issues because I'm only pressing WASD. And then, I know people and athletes who I've just seen who, play with the mouse, and there's some people that anchor their wrist and they're able just to make what we call micro movements. So you don't have a lot of swing. You're just truly just using your hand to move, and you're just using the wrist to anchor it and to angle it how you need to. And then there's the people who are like I call them full arm swingers. They're sitting here and they literally use their whole desk to move, and they're, just constantly moving the shoulder. And so now you're getting shoulder girdle injuries. And it's just there's so much with that. And it's just the way people play. And, it's understanding that, as we've touched on, 16 hours sitting there doing the same motions isn't good for you. And just learning how to break that up. Same thing with sedentariness. We talked about that a little bit. I think that's still a big risk that's underestimated. There's a lot of people who aren't healthy and don't exercise that we've touched on. And so getting that in people's heads that, we need to get these athletes outside working. And then back on, the long gaming sessions, the cognitive fatigue, constantly, exhausting your mental because you're doing repetitive things. I think it's touched on, but it's not thought about a lot with some of these athletes, is that, again, they don't have the people in the space like myself or like other researchers or other professionals, to really think about this. They do think, EA, it's in the game, it's in the game and that's all we do. There's nothing outside that, you're not going to get tired from playing, it's just gaming. It's not just gaming. There's a lot of bodily processes and a lot of energy expended doing this. So I think there's a lot of underestimated risk, but I also think there's a lot of benefits. And I'm sure that was going to be your next thing. But I mean, I look at it, the cognition's great. As I touched, there's tons of cognitive functions we use as esports athletes. And, learning to adapt in the moment, learning how to problem solve at the moment, learning how to make these tough split decisions and multitask. You're talking about neuroplasticity now. You're learning new things and you're connecting neurons, and your brain's just learning new things every time because not every game's the same. You're playing against another individual, just like in a traditional sport. The quarterback he could roll out of the pocket, he could throw a 50-yard pass. You just have to adapt on the fly. And then I think from a different perspective of benefits that I think are underestimated is the social emotional benefits that these people make, outside of an exercise thing. You're learning teamwork, you're learning how to talk with people, you're learning, what it means to be a team leader. Like I said, all my players were leaders in the game. And so you're learning how to communicate effectively, you're learning social skills, um, you're learning how to be a professional in that sense. You're learning the bare basics of socialization that I think some of these gamers miss out on, or like some people miss out on. Is that social interaction to where, like, yes, we're able to do this face to face and it's easy, but there's some people who aren't able to do this, and they suffer from anxiety and social awkwardness. And so, for me not to, if I wasn't comfortable with that, now all that's tied to me is a name in the game, and I am able just to talk to someone freely and break down barriers and slowly work on that thing. Um, and even, on a complete 180 from that is, people with disabilities. I think, gaming is great for that because, again, there are some people are ostracized due to disabilities, and the gaming takes that away from them. Or there's people who, maybe, have muscular dystrophy and can't get out of the house. And back to VR is we have people who can experience things. Obviously it'd be great to go outside and experience it, but sometimes they can't. And so, I read a Reddit article about a lady who had MD, and she popped in VR and was able to go to the Great Wall of China and see it clearly through this headset at, not like it's we're seeing it through 4K with our eyes, and it's great, but she got a basic understanding and could walk in the game and get to experience things. And so I think that the benefits of gaming and the community and outweigh these risks because the risks are easily managed. I don't think some of these benefits can ever get trumped by this repetitive injury because we can prevent that type of thing. But I guess the same could go for preventing anxiety, but I think that's a lot easier because those are hard steps to take. So I definitely think the benefits of this are great. And just to kind of the flow off of that, there's a team called the Matagi Snipers. They play Valorant, so a first-person shooter game, and they were the one of the first senior masters level teams. So you're talking, you have 60, 70-year-olds. It's a team based out, I think, Japan, who are playing this game at a high level. And, it's breaking down barriers because if you ask anyone in the esports space, you're out of your prime after you hit 30. You're done. You're an old man or an old woman at this point. We don't want you anymore. You don't mean anything to the community. Like, we got the fresh, 16-year-old who's at the top of his cognitive function. And so, I mean, they really broke down the barrier. And I mean, now there's tons of masters teams. I assume mostly out of the Asian countries because they're a little more on top of their health than Americans. And I think they're really breaking down the barriers and understanding that there is the benefit of cognition and like I said, neuroplasticity, that they're seeing the benefit of this and really learning to enhance their cognition. Or like I said, maybe the older people can't get out. And so now it's the social interactions they're having. And so I think there's a plethora of positive things to look at in esports when it comes to this.
Yeah, it's easy to forget those positive things, myself included. But if you touched on it, but if you hadn't, I was going to bring up like problem solving, being creative. You talked about adapting. I mean, some of the games, some of the games I remember playing that is almost like you had to like solve things. There's like tasks that you have to go back and think about, like your context clues. So like a couple ones that are action games but move kind of slow would be like the Tomb Raider games.
Mm-hmm.
Those were kind of like puzzle slash riddle heavy, and then like Metal Gear Solid is you have these tasks, and then a million other games you like level up, and there's even some guy started like a fitness business. He had like a fitness business for like video gamers, and I think he called it like Level Up Fitness or something. Wrote a book, had like a good little following online for a little while. Anyways, haven't heard about him in several years. Um, but I mean, I had a pretty normal childhood, like lots of sports, lots of outside activity, older siblings to play with. But the one of the things I remember was our time around the Super Nintendo console, and we went from Super Nintendo to a PlayStation, and we stayed on PlayStation to a PlayStation 2, and that was my career. My career ended with a PlayStation 2. Um, but like in my youth, it was the Super Mario Brothers and the Mario Kart, and it was those things. And then um, like every once in a while, we'd go out and get like a Resident Evil game, and like that was terrifying. But like my big brother's there, and so I could like hang with it for a little while. But like there's teamwork, there's communication, there's bonding. But particularly, I reflect on like creativity and problem solving, and obviously like people are creating a game to facilitate that. um, but it just trains your brain how to like, oh, this isn't working, do I give up like a knucklehead quitter, or do I like make it happen and resolve, like how do I fight to level up, how do I fight to solve that task or do whatever's that next thing. So as you touched on, I believe in those things, and I had my time with video games, and I look back on it fondly. But those are some of the things I take away from it. So I'm sort of hypocritical because I'm really scared of giving my kids too much screen time, but at the same time, I just gave you a spiel about my youth and like fond memories and benefits and things like that. Are you aware of any organizations that are putting some type of like suggested amount of playtime out or anything for like young minds?
I haven't dealt with much of it. I haven't looked into it too much because I'm not in the realm of having kids, and I haven't dealt with a younger population. Um, but I feel like it's in moderation. As we just touched on, I think there's a lot of value to it. And I don't want, kids that turn into iPad kids and constantly need this, stimulation. I think there's a small bits and pieces to it. But I think it goes deeper than that to, the cognitive benefits that come with it. There's, social to an extent. There's some pretty bad people in the world, and so maybe the socialness is, that they're not ready for that. So I think it starts small, where like you can do like puzzle games, and you can find stuff that, is easier for them to process, and they can spend, an hour on, and slowly build it up to where now, like once they're a little more understanding about some of the repercussions that come with that, I think it's a little bit easier of a conversation to have. But personally, I would say an hour, because I think there's benefit. I wouldn't be where I am today if I didn't get to play video games and I didn't get to understand some of the deeper meaning for things. And I wouldn't have understood that there's careers out there, for stuff like that. I think if you shelter individuals too much, I think you lose out on, again, all the benefits we just talked about. I think that it is tough, and I see where everyone comes from with it. There's all these, again, negative connotations, but I think if you understand the lay of the land, a lot of it can be avoided. So that's it. It's a tough question for me, again, because I don't know. Um, and maybe I should know, and maybe that's what I'll do after this. I'll look up the recommendations, but I'm a firm believer that there should be an allowance of it, but again, in moderation. Unless you want your kid to become a pro, then let them sit there for 16 hours playing.
How much? Well, I know that some of them make a good amount of money, but I don't think we're going to take that gamble.
Yes, I completely understandable.
Even though it could pay off, and my kids are amazing at everything they do, so they'd probably be rich. But yeah, I don't think we're going to take that gamble. Um, Future wise, what do you think is going to happen with the lay of the land of video games and gamers? And then you can combine that or just totally separate. What's your future look like?
Yeah, so I'll start with my future. So I'm currently a clinical research coordinator in Alzheimer's research at Washington University in St. Louis. A very big shift from my exercise science background, but luckily, due to everything I've learned in life, and gaming is now I've become more interested in the cognitive part of my job. So learning, I work on a big pharmaceutical contract. So I work with these investigational drugs. But after, starting this job a few weeks ago and learning more, my brain constantly goes to, why drugs? Why do we need this medication to, stop what we call amyloid plaques, or tau protein building up in the brain that's causing Alzheimer's? Why can't we look at something like gaming? Something that's already there. As I mentioned, neuroplasticity. These individuals could keep building new connections in their brain, and can that delay it? There's been some research out there about that. I'd love to get involved with it, but my contract doesn't allow me. But I'd love to do it. And I'm working on getting involved with that. I'm working on, getting involved in more spaces of esports research to, continue my passion and my love for this kind of stuff, and branching my background to these people. And then as far as I think where esports is going, I said they have done great. It has come a very long way from where we were, when I was playing in middle school. And I think anyone can attest to that. It's huge now. You literally have, people like Jerry Jones who owns teams, and it's more word of mouth, and you're seeing more things, and it's great. But I've always talked about it like it's cryptocurrency. That it's backed by the people, and without the people, there's nothing there. And so there's been instances where, professional teams have had to just cut everything because it just doesn't work out. There's no funding, there's no people backing it. There's some organizations that are able to upkeep it because it's very popular. I think it's the game League of Legends had more viewers than the Super Bowl. Like there's a big following for it, but there's no funding for teams to keep going. So there was an instance last year, maybe 2 years ago, with a team called Sentinels, who had to post a statement that, hey, we have enough money to function for 3 more months and then we're done. They were a top team winning top competitions, and they couldn't upkeep it. Um, that's outside extra science, but like it's a reality of it. I mean, it's very tough space for that. And I think that the longevity of athletes is something that's scary for people, because like I said, like you're talking about people when they're 30 are already getting dropped by teams. And I think the future involves, people like us having conversations, and people from traditional sports branching over. So Taylor Johnson was a former NFL performance coach, I think, for the 49ers. And he was on Robert Pacey's podcast, Pacey Performance, and he talked about all the differences, that he thought, and the misconceptions he had about esports athletes. And then he got into space, and then he finally understood, these individuals are athletes, and they are, working. And I think it's, esports needs to continue evolving. They need to, figure out the structure. They need to find you know, governing bodies. So, we have the NCAA, we have, the NFL who has their organizations. I just think there needs to be a bigger structure to make esports more sustainable, for it to continue going at its pace because, it's beautiful to see that it's such a big industry. Um, but I can't tell you how many times that I wanted to get involved as like a sports scientist with like professional teams, and the answer is no because they don't know that, the services are there. I was offering free services to monitor their teams, and they just didn't know because no one's ever thought about us like being able to get involved in this space because I'm not a sport and a sports scientist reach out to me. And that's from people
Yeah.
inside the organizations that just are not knowledgeable enough to know. And I think there's some people that understand that. So we were talking earlier, Maryville is one of the top programs in the world, and they understand what it takes. And as you were saying, like they're getting in the gym and they're doing, nutrition, and they understand. So I think it's about allowing more people like us to get in to break down the barrier, just again having conversations like this and putting more material out there for someone to come across. Like I had the decision to, publish my thesis about exercise in esports in a journal dedicated to esports athletes or dedicated to esports. I took the other road and said, no, I want it in, I got it published in ESM, so exercise, sport and medicine or sport and movement, I think, by ACSM. And I wanted it there. So people like us, people in exercise science and healthcare can see it and understand that it's an issue. That, not just financial side, but athletic side, that these athletes are not respected per se, and they're not, no one turns an eye to them to think that they're real people or like that they're real athletes. And so having the conversations and spreading the word and getting more people involved. Because I'll never forget when I was at Lindenwood, you always asked me about it. How is the team doing? How can I get involved in it? And it needs to be the eagerness to, understand that, you know, they are athletes. I just had to explain to some lady in my work that, they're athletes. You're thinking too much about the physicalness of sports and not enough about every component that goes into it. So, I mean, if there's anything I want to leave, it's, talk about it more. Get more people excited to watch it because it's fun to watch. Um, if you're into it. I don't want to force people to watch it, but it's fun to watch. And, like I said, like the viewership is there, the competitiveness is there. You just have to get over the hump of learning something new and, taking your knowledge and applying it. That's all we've done in life is we take one thing and we apply it to the next.
One thing I kind of wish I had asked earlier, but I'm not gonna get it. I'm not gonna let you get away without asking. Um, how about like nootropics or performance enhancing drugs or anything else? What's taboo? What's not allowed? Or what's working for people that they're using, whether it's allowed or not allowed?
Yeah, so a lot of it allowed energy drinks. You'll see a lot of people do energy drinks. Most of the tournaments, you'll see people who, I mean, they'll have their cups. Obviously, you're not going to have a free branding, but some of them have energy drinks in there, to keep their cognitive up. Caffeine is a performance enhancer, not only for physical sports, but for mentally capacitating sports that, it does give that cognitive boost. I did research when I was at Lindenwood about it, and we found that it helps. So there's a lot of that. I mean, pills, I've seen some of, we did paraxanthin, so I'm gonna get another caffeine-like substance that, I took and anecdotally I think it helped. There's people that would do this is a big no-go, and there's a big article about athletes using like narcolepsy medication to like as a cognitive performance enhancer and abusing that and abusing Adderall. I think Adderall is one of the biggest abused, drugs in this space because, it brings you from a point of you're in a deficit to now you're above a deficit. I mean, there's people who will argue that it brings you back up the baseline, but anecdotally, from talking with people, they're hyper focused more than they've ever been when they take that. And there's organizations who don't allow it. Obviously, I think in the collegiate space when I was there, like there was no testing. We didn't care if our athletes were on it because there's no governing body who wants to take it over because it's such a big hassle to start from scratch and no one can agree on anything. And we have six governing bodies for 18 different things who want to get involved, and no one wants the same rule set, no one wants the same regulations. Um, and so it's tough. I mean, I think the safe bet is the caffeination for athletes. I think that'll always stick around. That the ease of going out and grabbing a little energy drink and popping 120 milligrams of caffeine before your event and letting it go. I mean, I had plenty of athletes do it. I never stopped them because I didn't see, like, as a nutrition researcher, I didn't see a problem with it because I read the literature. But if I had an athlete come to me and say, I started taking, you know, some new probiotic or something, and they're telling me it says it boosts, cognitive enhancement. Like I would literally do the research and tell them, I would lay it to them straight. There is companies who get away with, mislabeling and, saying that things do what they do when they don't. My supplement has caffeine in it. So yeah, of course it helps a cognitive boost, but there's no research to back it. There's plenty of companies that do that. And so, I think that the do's are caffeine and the don'ts are everything else. If it's not well researched, and I implore coaches and athletes to research before you do, like know before you put something random in your body that you think is doing what it's doing, and then you have adverse events, or it's not doing it. Now you're wasting your money on this sham. So I would say definitely the nootropic to look at is caffeine, because there's plenty of individuals who have done esports research looking at that.
Very good. Thanks for that. My next question, we've covered a lot, so let me know if you've got something for me. If not, that's all right. This podcast is the Winning Wellness Podcast, and I basically approach wellness in two different ways there. One is that some people need to win their wellness. They are unwell, and the victory for them would be just getting back to baseline and being feeling better, happier, healthier. And then another dimension that would be to win well. And so that's those people who are competitive, they have certain goals, and we're trying to help them win well. Do you have any tips, ideas, strategies, comments on anything in that umbrella that we may have or have not discussed?
Yeah, I would say prioritize sleep. I think that will be something I'm going to hound every time, is that, I mean, especially in this realm, is there's not a lot of sleep going on. I can't remember, the statistic off the top of my head from my study, but like they weren't getting sleep. You're talking 44 hours a week, what we touched on earlier, that they're gaming, plus minus 2 24 hour or 22 hours. So you're talking 66 hours of gaming a week. And, that's leaking over into the early mornings. Like I had athletes who would message me at 4 in the morning and be like, hey, we just got done on a 16 game streak and we're going to bed and getting up for class in like 2 hours. And I think that, improving, sleep hygiene, is the simplest way to boost performance for people. I think, again, we touched on it, I think, a little bit, but like it's undervalued. It's underthought of, that you think you can get away with it because these athletes think they're untouchable. They're young, they don't understand the benefits of sleep and the feelings you can get when you get a solid 8 hours of sleep, and you're off your phone before sleep, like an hour before you sleep, and you stop eating 3 hours before you sleep. And I don't think they understand the value that comes with that. So
Yeah.
and it leads into so many other things, bad sleep and discomfort. you're sleeping wrong because you're compensating for things. And, um, and just the trickle down effect of, bad sleep, bad reaction time, bad cognitive function. It's just, I think that's the number one thing to preach about, the wellness aspect of this.
Yeah, I think that's a great factor to focus on. I like the saying, you can't have a good day after a bad night.
I truly believe that. After wearing an Oura ring for a week, I learned my recovery sucked when I didn't get any sleep.
Okay.
Um,
Are you still wearing it? What adjustments have you made?
I don't wear it anymore because I don't like the ring. I don't
Okay.
like the bulkiness. But I will say I've become more cognizant of it. Before I moved to where I am now, I had an hour commute and I would still be playing video games and go to bed at 1 in the morning and have to wake up at 4 in the morning to go to work. And I constantly found myself taking naps when I got home. I'd be like, oh, I'm so energetic. I made it through my day. Like I wake up in the morning and I'm in tip-top shape. I got 3 hours of sleep and I'm doing everything. I constantly told myself, like, there's nothing wrong. Like you're doing great in life. Like you're happy to talk to everyone in the morning. You're real peppy and what's wrong with that? What is 3 hours going to affect me? And then I started noticing a lot of naps in the afternoons. I say nap and it turns into 6 hours sleeping, and now I'm up at 6 p.m. and I can't get to bed when I need to. And then the cycle keeps going, and I see deficits in just feeling good, like physically feeling good. I could tell that I'm more groggy and that, I'm wanting to do less. And so I've definitely made adjustments now, and my girlfriend has been, a big proponent in advocating for good sleep because of this. Um, so I'm in bed by like 8 or 9 p.m. and, I get up at a reasonable time and I can slowly ease into my morning now because I'm up at a time and I'm not rushed to get ready for work. I can really take the time to do the things I want to and really, build up that morning. So
Yeah. Yeah. Good thing for girlfriends and wives who tell us time to go to bed.
yeah,
What question should I ask, but I have not?
I think we touched a little bit on, and I'd love to talk about a little more, is making, esports more sustainable for long-term careers. I think the biggest thing with this is looking at it from the standpoint that, like I said, there's a lot of burnout factor with athletes. And I know I touched on it a little bit, but I feel like it's important to keep touching on that, these players need more structured and more people around. I don't want to keep harping it, but the research, the conversations, I think is very important for this. So I just want to keep bringing it up because I feel like it's
Yeah,
important.
right on. And then if listeners wanted to connect with you, would that be welcome? And how would you prefer it?
Yeah, I'd love for people to connect with me. I'm constantly building my professional repertoire with people. You can find me on X at Connor Gage or Connor J Gage. That's CONNOR J, and then Gage is GAIGE. You can find me in my Gmail at my first and last name at Gmail. You can find me at my current university at Gage at wustl.edu. Or you reach out to Mitch and tell him to give you my information. I'd love to talk. I'm always wanting to learn and figure out new things in the space and how I can apply my knowledge to all the different avenues I found myself in since I've started my professional career.
Awesome. Got anything else for us, or are you good to go?
I am gonna send you a nice graphic that if you want to use it. I don't know how much we hit on it for how to get involved in the space, but let me send in the chat real quick.
And then
So
we'll close out, and then we'll chat a little bit afterwards.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, what I just sent is esports related professions. So this goes over every single job from education, administration, business, to, our side of things that if you're looking to get involved in esports, the types of positions that are open and where you can branch off into.
Whoa. Okay. I got it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's by Nico, I think Nico Bezboms. He's a researcher out of France. Made a great blog article about it, and he was able to, come up with this little graphic that really gives a good, oversight of how much goes into esports, and how we can get involved and where to look and what kind of jobs we can be expecting to be in this space.
Yeah. Wow. Excellent. Well, I'll put that link under the video. So whether the image ends up on the video or not, the link will end up on the show notes. So, well, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. This is a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Winning Wellness Podcast. Please keep in mind that all views expressed within the show are not a reflection of any universities or organizations that I may be affiliated with. If you have any questions or suggestions for future shows, please reach out through Instagram, where I can be found with the title name of Mitch Schwartzman.